I'm Charles, and I'm here in the LA Bread Lab with my lovely wife, Lori, who's behind the camera. And today we're going to make some matzah. Year after year, for about 10 years now, I've been making matzah for my dear friends who I see every year at the seder. And it's turned into something that we all look forward to and really means seder for us. Unfortunately this year, because of coronavirus, we're not going to be together. We're going to have a Zoom seder, and we'll see each other, but we won't be able to share the food the way we normally do. What we're going to do today is teach everybody how to make matzah so that we can all have the flavors that we crave and make it feel a little bit more like the seder that we all wish we were having, even though unfortunately we can't be face to face. So I'm ready. I've got my apron. I've got my hat on to hide my coronavirus haircut. By the way, shout out to 4505 Meats on Divisadero in San Francisco. If they're still doing takeout, throw them some money. Those are good people and they make a great product. So let's take a look at what we're going to make today. This is what ancient matzah probably looked like. And if we look at both sides, we see that it's all bubbly and crispy and rustic. And it's got a beautiful, intense, rich flavor that store-bought just can't match. So let's teach you guys how to make this for yourself. Before we get started rolling and making all our matzah, we got to get our oven going because it's going to take a while for it to get hot. So what we're going to do is we're going to get this oven up to 475. And remember, it takes only a certain amount of time for the oven to get hot, but inside are stones. So you're gonna need something to bake on. I've got these awesome professional baking stones from a company called Omco. They're made of stuff called fibrament. Super extra thick. You may not have that. If you've got a pizza stone, that is ideal. If you don't have a pizza stone, maybe you've got one of those metal pizza discs, you can work on that. But that's kind of what you need. If all you have are baking trays, it's not gonna work. They don't have enough thermal density, and sometimes they're not even supposed to go as hot as you're supposed to be baking this. So you need something hot, like a rock, to bake this on. Okay, so one thing I want to point out here is that I've got two stones in the oven, and one above and one below, and this is a great way to bake bread. In this particular case, they're pretty close together, so that the matzah is going to bake from conduction on the bottom and radiation from the top. One thing to remember is that these stones are heavy and take a long time to heat up. So when your oven says 500 or 550, give it another 15 minutes or so that you can make sure that the stones are hot too. This is one of the reasons why we do this first, because it takes a while. So as always, we got the recipe written down. Here's the recipe. And first thing we want to do is measure it out, right? We're baking by weight, not by volume, so that we have accuracy. So this time we're going to be using a mixer. I'm just going to put my mixer bowl right on the scale, and then I'm going to use the tare button to cancel out the weight of the mixer bowl. And now we're going to add our ingredients. So we're going to start with the flour, and that's 276 grams of all-purpose flour. We got a kind of a quick start there. And you just shake it in and dump it in until you get pretty close. And you start with your flour because if you go over, it's pretty easy to back some out. But I didn't go over. It's exactly 276 grams. All right, so now we're going to cancel out the weight of the flour. And we're going to put in our salt. We want 6 grams of salt. So you can just put that in with your fingers. Don't go too fast because you can't get this back out once you put it in there. All right, next is the water. So I'm going to cancel out the weight of the salt we just put in, and we want 172 grams of water. So this part's just a little trickier. Oh, 180. That's 8 grams too much, and guess what? We're going to learn to love again. So not everything with baking is all that perfectly accurate. A couple extra grams, that's fine. If it's too gushy when we're working it, you can throw a little flour in at the end. This is matzah, it's not brioche. Okay, so you can see we got kind of a mixed bag here. We got some dry flour and some water and slurry, and it's all kind of messy. So the first thing we've got to do is sort of get this stuff incorporated before we can start kneading it. So we're going to use this attachment. Sometimes you call it the beater, sometimes you call it the paddle, and this is really great for mixing up loose and rough stuff before we get to the kneading. So we're just going to attach it and plop it down, make sure to lock it, and then we're just going to turn it on. So you can see it's kind of knocking everything together, and when it gets to this sort of stiff thing that we call shaggy mass, and it's a really well descriptive term. See how it's like kind of straining? That's when you stop it. All right, so we're gonna open up the mixer and get ourselves a rubber spatula, take off the beater, and then just scrape as much as you can off the beater. We don't want to lose more than we have to, right? Every last gram's not necessary, but remember this, we did measure fairly carefully. Now we're going to switch to the hook, and this is what kneads the dough. And so we're going to put our hook on, lock it down, and with kneading bread on a KitchenAid, speed 2 is your maximum. You don't want to put too much pressure on the motor. Faster is not necessarily better, okay? And we're going to knead this for 5 minutes. We're not making that much in this case. This is, about, half a pound or a pound of matzah. And this is half the recipe that some of you may have in my published recipe, but we're just making enough to demonstrate how we make matzah today. If you're making more than this, one thing that you might want to look out for is that the dough tends to climb up the hook, and if it climbs over that flange, it can get into the mechanism, and everybody has a big sad at that point. So what you might want to do is spray a little bit of cooking oil, or rub a little bit of cooking oil on the top of that flange, and that way when the dough climbs up, it can't grab it and it flies off to the side, and everything stays out of the springs and mechanisms of your KitchenAid. All right, so 5 minutes or maybe a little more has gone by, and you can see the thing's really looking slick and ropey, and nothing's sticking to the bottom of the bowl anymore, and that's just what we want. All right, so we're gonna turn the mixer off, unlock her, and tilt the head back, and that's pretty much what we're looking for, right? It's kind of springy, and that looks good. So what we want to do now is we're gonna unhook the hook and bring it over to our breadboard. So this is pretty sticky, so let's put some flour down. Let's get our spatula and just start working it off using the edge of the spatula. It'll come off. This is not an especially oily or gooey bread, and if you have a nice stainless steel hook like I do, you kind of just work it off until it comes off the edge. That's it. Okay, this is really important. You need a scraper, right? They come in all shapes and sizes. They come in plastic, they come in metal, but you're gonna need something to help you keep the dough from sticking to the board. Okay, now we want to shape the dough into a ball. So there's a couple of ways to do this. One is the old, like, I'm making a meatball approach, where you just sort of roll it around in your hands, and that's pretty good. I prefer a different approach. You find yourself a place on the board, has no flour, and sort of pull the dough back and back until it gets kind of sticky. Put that sticky part right down on the board so you get some nice traction. And now you can roll it around with your hands. What you're doing is you're making a space that's a little bit bigger than the ball, and you're rolling the ball in and around to your hands. And the fact that it's stuck to the bottom of the board means that tension will build up. That's what you're trying to do. We're trying to get a nice tense ball. And there we go, right? See, it kind of looks like a spiral on the bottom. That's what it should look like. So, all right.
Okay.
So, you could use a scale to cut this into pieces when you have a lot of dough. That's really convenient. In this case, we know we just have to cut it in half and cut it in half again. And then you've got 4 nice pieces. And now what we're going to do is we're going to do that dough rolling thing again, where we make a ball. You can do it with one hand this time. This is a pro technique you want to try to master. There's a million reasons to want to do this, from dinner rolls. This is a pre-step for baguettes. This is a pre-step for any time you want to make dough go into a nice tight ball. Big ones use 2 hands, little ones use 1 hand. And you can see, you know, what I'm doing is I'm cupping my hand around it so the dough rolls around a common center and in and around my hand. And there we go, 4 nice tight dough balls.
Okay.
So now what we need to do is set up a resting station where the dough can be and keep it moist so it doesn't dry out. I know if you grew up with matzo like me, you're like, dry matzo, what's the problem? But trust me, if it's dry before you bake it, you're not gonna like it. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna set up a cookie sheet, and you got some parchment paper. Just take the dough, rest it here, and whenever you're not working with it, you want it covered. And so we're gonna cover it with a nice little tea towel. And, all right, now we're gonna start shaping the matzah. First thing we do is we start shaping it by hand. So we're gonna open this up, and we're gonna start pinching it, and you kind of make it into like a little hat first. So just pinch the edges and then pinch the middle, and you get yourself a little flat thing. So pinch the edges, then pinch the middle, flat thing. I'll just go ahead and do these others. Now if you're doing more than 4, you don't want to do too many more than these. You want to let those other dough balls stay the way they are and covered, because they will dry out. But we're going to let these rest. One of the things that happens with bread dough is that the gluten structure, the more you work it, the tighter it gets. And we need to be able to roll these out super thin. So we're going to give it a rest here so that that tightness can relax. All right, so now it's time to actually start rolling out the matzah. We're going to do it with a rolling pin. If you have a wooden one, that works well. For matzah, I like this non-stick one. It's an OXO brand, easy to use. So what we're going to do is we're going to lift up our tea towel and take our first matzah. Now you're going to feel that it's a little drier on the upside and a little stickier on the bottom. And we don't want this like stuck to the board, right? Because then we'll never get it up. So what I do is I have a little pile of flour that I keep here, and I just, you know, flour this little thing. Let's push it back out of the way. And what we want to do is feel that it's nice and slidey, and it is nice and slidey. So the first thing we're going to start is the way you roll. This is like rolling pie dough, only we're going to roll it really thin. You're going to start from the middle and roll out and rotate. And already it's starting to grip on the wood, which isn't bad. So we'll just, right, and go back to where you left off. You're trying to get it to be roughly round. And you see how it's kind of stuck there? If I pull, it'll release. And that's actually a good sign that the matzah, whoa, come on there. All right, looks like we need a little bit more flour under the matzah. That's fine. We don't want to get too much flour, right? Sometimes you can just sort of do this and pull a little bit off, right? But look how beautifully this rolls out. And we're probably to about 1/16 of an inch now. Really thin. Now notice I'm keeping one hand here and then rolling here. I'm not using this because then it's going to like roll up around and you say bad words. But see how that's working? And look at this. Look how quickly You find the little thick areas now at this point, just trying to even it out. And look at that, right? Super thin. Now we got to put the holes into the matzah. If anybody knows who has made crackers or eats matzah, they got all those little holes. And what those holes do is they actually pinch the dough together in certain areas so that when the steam inside the dough makes it sort of swell up, it doesn't swell up where the holes are, and that makes this sort of blistery, crackery texture that we like out of matzah. So you can use a roller with points on it called a docker, or you can just use a fork. I bet you don't have a docker, so we're going to use a fork. All right, so what you're doing is you're just going to go through, right? And you see I'm giving a little wiggle? That makes sure that I'm all the way through. Right, we're going to go all the way. We're going to make a couple regular ones like this. All right, and now we're going to go and just get them all over. This is why a docker is really nice, because you can just go and then you have all your holes. But we forgot to bring our docker from San Francisco to the LA Bread Lab when we pulled up the drawbridge. So this is what we're going to do. Okay, that's pretty good. That's docked. You can put as many in there as you want. So now the time has come to stretch this thing out a little bit. Not as much as like a pizza, but we want to give it just a little bit more thinness and get those holes to open up a little bit. So what we're going to do is we're going to get some flour on our hands. It's always good to keep your hands floured, right? And then notice how when you pick this thing up, try not to hold it by the edges. Try not to pinch it. And so what I'm doing is I'm stretching it out by laying it over my hand and stretching out my fingers. And you try not to pinch it, but we're getting it super thin. It's really turning into a handkerchief now. This is just beautiful. I love this. This is one of the best things in the world. All right, and look at that. Look how gorgeous that is. All right, now you're going to need to get it onto the stone. I use a peel, which is this big wooden paddle that you see at pizzerias. It's great for bread and matzah. If you don't have a peel, you can use the back of a cookie tray. Don't use the top because it's got a rim and then you'll never get it off, right? So what we're going to do here is we're going to take our peel, lay it down. Going to get some flour. And you want a good amount of flour here, right? Because you do not want this matzah sticking to the peel. I'm going to take the matzah, lay it out, make sure it's not doubled up. Now this is the place where things tend to go wrong for people. Just practice, guys. And the first thing we do is we test that it's moving around. You see how it's kind of like shuckling around there? We can tell it's loose. That's great. Now what we're going to do is, you're not going to be able to see it too well when I do it in the oven. What we're going to do, I'm going to pretend this is the pizza stone, okay? So I'm going to put it in on the pizza stone, I'm going to lift it up, and I'm going to pull it back. And it's going to right down on the stone. All right, let's put it in. So you want to open the door, you're going to put this in, and you pull it back, and close her up. Close her up right away. Now we're going to count to 120. This thing cooks in 2 to 3 minutes. So we're going to count to 120. 1, 2, 3, 4, 47, 48, 49. So we're coming up to a minute. This stuff cooks really fast, so let's check on it. So I'm going to open it up and look at that. We already got these little bubbles forming. Looks almost like a little Stone Age pizza. So we're looking for any brown coming through the bottom. And these tongs are great because now we can just pull up and see what's going on. Oh, little dark spots are coming up the way they're supposed to. I'm going to check it back in about another 30 seconds to a minute. We're coming up on about 2 minutes. And I don't know if you can see, but there's some brown starting to seep through from the other side. That's the sign that we want to think about turning this thing over. So we're going to take our peel, pull it back on the peel, flip it over. Oh, look at that. Winner. And then we put her right back on the stone. Now we're only about 30 seconds to a minute away. So check it again in 30 seconds. All right, we're starting to get some good color. What we're interested in is making sure that these edges, which will always be the thickest part, are fully cooked through and crisp. We don't want chewy, tortilla-like edges. I mean, they're nice, but they're not matzah. But look at that color that's coming through. I don't know if you can see that. At this point, it's stiff enough I can just pull it out and flip it. Yeah, now we're really getting somewhere. All right, let's give it another 30 seconds. Okay, I think we're probably there. What you don't want is a burned matzah, right? And these middle sections, oh, you can hear it crunching and crackling under the tongs, right? Don't break it in half. You can tap it. Yeah, it's starting to sound pretty crisp. Making matzah is not an exact science. It's an art, right? And it's an art you can master pretty quick, but notice that first 120 seconds, like it's already a minute behind us or a minute and a half behind us and we're still not quite there. This is like frying an egg or making a grilled cheese sandwich. It's done. You know it when it's done. And you'll make enough of these and you'll get good at it. So I think at this point, I think she needs to come out. Yeah, look at that. That's the sign of a beautiful matzah. Let's take a look here. What do we got here? We got a beautiful brown center. We've got nice spots. Look at these edges. These edges are brown and toasted. That's a sign that they're well cooked. Turn it over. There's a little bit of the flour. This was the first side that went down. And she's stiff, right? Like a matzah should be. And if we take her over and put her in front of the light, you can see that light coming through. My friend Kristen Talley has a beautiful photo on the internet of candlelight at the seder table coming through the holes. There's something really beautiful about a rustic piece of matzah. I mean, if you look at this thing, it's nothing like what we in America, as sort of American Jews, grew up with, those square robot matzahs that came out of the box, which none of us really liked. I mean, some of us maybe, but it's really not as good as this. This looks a lot more like what matzah probably looked like in the original story, right? They were Stone Age people. They probably baked it on a rock. They rolled it out with a wooden dowel or a stick, or maybe they just stretched it out with their hands. It was probably a lot closer to, you know, flatbreads like naan or other flatbreads that we all know about. Kind of running on here. So at this point, I might as well just say to everybody, Chag Sameach, happy Passover, and I can't wait to be at the table with you next time, the way we have been in the last years. But know that deep inside here, we're all going to be at the table together when we celebrate this Passover Seder, as we have for thousands of years unbroken, and this year is no other exception. So, happy Passover. What are you doing there, Lori, with this monster?
Well, the greatest thing about making a video is that you have a lot of takes. It means a lot of matzah. This is a garlic and thyme-infused olive oil that I made. Mm-hmm. We're gonna slap some of that on there.
Yeah, this is not kosher for Passover. But
no, but it's kosher in my mouth.
Fucking cares, right?
And then we're gonna take this stuff, which is gold.
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
A little everything mix.
This is full of flavor.
And
you know who likes flavor? Jews.
Jews like flavor?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Good to know.
Everybody likes flavor.
Good to know.
If you don't like flavor, you know, watch a different video.
Oh yeah.
Now what?
Now you put this in your mouth.
Oh, look at that break.
And then you get really happy.
Breaks like matzah. Here, give me that. Okay, so what we're going to use is this attachment. This is called the paddle. Sometimes it's called the beater. And we're going to attach it to the KitchenAid. Let's start over. turn it over and press down if you have to get it to really stick to the board. Trying to get it to stick to the board. It's not sticking to the board. All right, let's try this again. Let's do that. Okay, so we're going to use this. All right, let's try it again. All right, try it again.
What doing?
What doing? So, are you still filming?
Oh, yeah.
Stop that.